We're here today with Nigel Travis. Nigel and I have become friendly because we have a mutual friend in the one and only Professor Jeff Sonnenfeld, who's the Associate Dean at the Yale School of Management. And Nigel and I, for the last bunch of years, probably 6 or 7 now, have had the opportunity to do a class once a year up at the Yale School of Management in the MBA program. And we get to work with Helene Fawkes and Nigel, myself. And there's usually a fourth guest retail person who visits with that wonderful class, and that person rotates. Last year it was a terrific man, Eric Nordstrom from the Nordstrom retail family. Wonderful guy. He's the CEO there. And Nigel and I get to hang out for the day, eat pizza, meet some really terrific students, and spend time with our friend Jeff Sonnenfeld, who we'll talk more about later. But Nigel, I've just admired your career so much. You've done so many things, mostly around retail, but not just. And I'm curious, it'll become clear to our community kind of quickly that you weren't born in Brooklyn, and that in fact you have British roots. And I'm curious about how your approach to managing so many American iconic brands, how your Britishness impact how you look at brands, organizations, and in particular, leadership and culture coming from a British perspective. Is it different? Has it caused you to approach those many, many different roles in a different kind of way?
Wow, Jim, firstly, good morning. And that's a question I've never had. So I appreciate that. I have been asked many times how someone from basically the East End of London has been involved with so many iconic American brands, particularly one here in the Northeast, which is synonymous with the Northeast, which is Dunkin.
Uh-huh.
And for those listeners who don't know, that the story goes that if you want to find your way around Boston, you tell people, well, you go down that road, turn right at the Dunkin, go down a bit further, turn left at the next Dunkin, and when you get to the next one, turn right and you'll be there.
As I think about the different roles you played, you mentioned your involvement with Blockbuster. You've led or advised businesses as different as Dunkin', Blockbuster, Burger King, Papa John's. If you strip away the name, is there something in common that all of those companies had? They all had brands. Is there something, especially the ones that were misunderstood or struggling when you got there? If you step back, in that first 90 days, did you develop a playbook of what you did to get your arms around what the real issues were and to put a plan in place to correct it? Was there a commonality?
I think there's 2 or 3 commonalities. One is, despite the fact I'm very focused on people, I also like to see data, and the commonality between all those brands you mentioned is they're basically retail, as you said at the start. Quick service restaurants is retail because we sell to customers. One of the benefits we have is in fast food, people come very frequently. I mean, I'm also, just to add, so your listeners got a full picture right now, because I'm in retirement, so-called.
The heck you are.
Yeah.
You're
I'm
living a portfolio life now.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it.
Because right now you're an executive with Blackstone, the private equity asset management firm, and as such, they've asked you to chair a few different companies, including Abercrombie, Pro.
Abercrombie is a public company, so it's nothing to do with Blackstone. But yeah, Blackstone. I'm lead director of Jersey Mike's. The chairman position goes to Peter Cancro, who's an iconic founder, and then Tropical Smoothie I chair, and then I chair another company that's nothing to do with Blackstone, but I'm also on the board of a couple of other Blackstone entities, including a dental company.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all of them have this fast-moving pace to it. In other words, people come to retail stores regularly. They come and get their food regularly. And one of the things I like is going to stores. I mean, you and I both have residences in Naples, Florida. A lot of my brands are based down there. Later today, I'm going to see a new concept that Blackstone's looking at and you have to go and see it and feel it and understand the opportunities. I'll also go later today to a new tropical smoothie that's out my way. So to answer your question, I think it's the data you need. And when I got to Dunkin, we were bereft of data. I mean, it was embarrassing how little data we had. And again, for your listeners, most retail companies get what's called like-for-like sales or comps every day.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to Dunkin, we used to have it once a week. And so that meant a big change.
And it might not be that accurate.
It might not be that accurate. But the other thing I've learned over time, you need a forecast. How can you measure it? So let me give you an example. Last week, which I don't know when this episode will go out, but last week was the Christmas New Year week. So it means that one day a year ago doesn't match with the same day this year because you've got New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, and so on. So you need to have a forecast by day so you can say that was a good day or a bad day, else it's very easy to get fooled or disappointed by the numbers. So I like that. I also like to have a management team that's energetic. I mean, that probably reflects, if you like, my personality. And I've always had a lot of energy. I'm not quite sure why, but I have. And I think all the businesses you can improve all the time. And I've tried to look at it. And today, as a chairman, basically, I constantly are thinking, how can you improve this business? One bit at a time.
As you think about the role you mentioned at Dunkin, as someone who was a marketer or tries to be, that was one of the big marketing challenges. Not only didn't you have data, but there was a culture of independence among your operators, your franchisees, which is why perhaps you didn't have the data. It was sort of secret. Tell me, the transformation you did was nothing short of remarkable there. But the biggest challenge, I would think, as an outsider, was convincing the organization that they had to move away from being donuts to a platform. And that brand change being the flashing light on that pyramid of challenges. Tell us about that process of changing the brand and changing the thinking of a whole organization. We're not in a donut and coffee business. We're a platform that serves people with great frequency.
Well, I'm going to start off by being honest. I think the transformation to being a coffee brand happened before I got there. So, but the problem before I got there, and I'm not going to name names, is Dunkin is a company like Papa John's, like Jersey Mike's, like Tropical Smoothie, where the business is done through franchisees. Franchisees basically take a brand because they're enthusiastic about the economic opportunities for them and perhaps employment opportunities. I detected right from the start a gap between the franchisees and the brand when I got there. I was helped, Jim, by the fact it was right in the middle of the financial recession. I went there in the first week of 2009. So I think most people think about the financial meltdown as 2008. So I got there and the franchisees were complaining about the fact they were going to go out of business. I actually had 2,200 loss-making stores when I got there.
No. Wow.
Yeah. And that was out of about, I can't remember the numbers, say 6,000. So the franchisees were irate and upset. But I did a listening tour, and I remember in particular, and so do a lot of franchisees, remember we had a big session in Fort Lauderdale about unit economics, which is the unit economics of each store. And the biggest thing I learned from that is that coffee has huge margins. Coffee is 85% margins. And that's fantastic. So we agreed to...
And it's habit forming.
Oh, very happy. Yeah, but by the way, on that, and whether this is true or not, it's a good story. I once went in a store and I met a customer who was a contractor, and I said, oh, thank you for your business. He said, yeah, I love Dunkin. It gives me a break because I'm a painter. So I said, how many times do you come a day then? Oh, about 17 times. I'm sure it's not true, but You're right. It is habit forming. And so I think the thing I did was work with the franchisees. We worked together. And it's interesting. I think we must have been successful because many of those same people are very good friends of mine now. And so we worked on the coffee side. We worked on the marketing. We worked on the numbers. And at the time, Dunkin wasn't getting the P&Ls of all the franchise stores, which you need to be able to help make decisions. Within 3 or 4 months, we had every single franchisee and the trick was working together.
Yes.
I mean, previous management used to come up with ideas, but not talk to franchisees, not try and get their input. And as a result of that, they didn't get them on board. So I think it's through working together. And I mentioned earlier about the gap between the brand and the franchisees. My philosophy of franchising is recognize that franchisees have got one P&L, the company has another P&L, so there is a conflict by necessity. Recognize it, but work on bridging it. And a couple of things we did was we were very open about all the numbers. We worked on share goals, but something that I know will be music to your ears, given all the great work you've done, we had a foundation that did great charitable work, and it was franchisees and the brand that worked together. So that helped bridge those gaps by us working on a shared goal, which was the charitable work.
And what do you think, what internal resistance were you surprised at when you got to Dunkin' and when you tried to execute this change? Is there something that, wow, I never saw that coming?
I think it was just the lethargic approach. I mean, it was interesting. When I got to Papa John's, I was told, well, I think you'll have to change the whole management team. I changed no one. When I got to Dunkin', I changed everyone within a year and a half.
Wow.
And again, it wasn't necessarily just because I wanted to change. I mean, I think at Papa John's, I could have changed, but didn't. It was because people were just lethargic. They weren't looking for ways to improve the business. They weren't energetic getting out with the franchisees, because one of the difficulties about America, and a lot of Americans forget this is a huge country, and to travel to California, to Florida, to Seattle, or wherever it is, these are huge distances, and it means you've got all these individual markets with different needs. When I got to Dunkin', we actually had some terrible markets. I mean, I'll tell you what they were: Nashville, Charlotte, Buffalo, and Atlanta. We came up with a plan that was different for every single one of those. And if I talk to my friends at Dunkin', and by the way, I sold Dunkin' to Rourke back in 2020, so just over 5 years ago, all those markets were doing really well.
Wow.
So, but the point is, it is not a cookie cutter approach that we adopted. It was individual market plans. One, for instance, Atlanta, we bought all the stores back, made them corporate stores, turned them around very quickly, and then resold them to the franchisees. In Nashville, we found a great franchisee who consolidated a lot of other franchisees. I mean, it was a plan related to the geography.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things where people sometimes go wrong in America. And one of my funniest stories at Dunkin' was I was very pleased one morning to be on Good Morning Arkansas at the local radio station, that local TV station in Little Rock. And I was in this studio, and there was someone doing pets, someone doing flowers. You'd be interested in that. Someone in the kitchen. Later in the day, I went around 3 stores. I was shocked. All these people came up to me. I saw you on TV this morning. But the thing I remember is someone said to me in one of those meetings, Nigel, I know you come from Boston. We like our donuts down here really sweet, and you guys don't understand it. You need to put double coating on the frosting of the donuts. So You get feedback everywhere, but recognize America has all these communities. I think it's the learning from that.
Make birthdays even happier with buttercream frosted cookies, dreamy cakes, and more. Wishes come true one bite at a time with tasty surprises from Cheryl's Cookies. Now let me turn the tables and put you on the spot here. You've been a CEO, you've been a president, you've been a COO, you've been a CEO, all different kinds of brands. And lately, running that portfolio life the last 4 or 5 years, where you're bringing your collective experiences to leadership roles as a chair and as an executive chair. The board of directors of 1-800-Flowers had the good sense to hire a fellow as a CEO earlier this year. His name is Adolfo. Adolfo's doing a very, very good job and executing a real platformic change at the flowers companies. What advice would you have for me as the executive chair in terms of the relationship I work to develop and maintain and evolve with Adolfo? In the first 7 or 8 months that he's been there, I think it's been really, really good. I've done my best to stay out of his way and be a resource for history, for story, for legend, and for insights, because he's a very smart guy and a very experienced guy, but not in the flower and gifting business. So what advice would you have for me to, as that relationship matures and develops, to make sure I'm thinking about it the right way so that I have the highest probability of him being enormously successful?
Wow. Well, because I know you, I think you tick the first box, which is you're a great listener. And I think you have to listen to him rather than tell him is my first advice. And I think the best way to build a relationship is to do things together. It's a bit like, the franchisees at Dunkin. I think going on visits to your facilities together is a great way of talking, because you won't necessarily talk with him all the time. You'll talk to other people and see things. It makes the communication much more relaxed. And I always used to say, when I was at places like Blockbuster, the best relationships I had with my subordinate were with international people, because, you fly to like China or Korea with them together, you sleep on the plane, you have meals on the plane. It's not a constant one-on-one communication. And I think that's a great way of establishing a relationship. I think I would also say you have to be disciplined. In your case, it's your baby. And you're going to have to, and I've had a little bit of this with David Gandler at Leighton Orient. He's got different ideas. He's got a different background. And I think you have to learn to have your ideas challenged. And one of the things I used to do at Dunkin about every 2 years, I used to have a management meeting and we say, guys, breaking news. We've just been taken over by a private equity firm. What do you think they would do? And I made everyone say what they would do. And the idea of that is to make people undo what we've done, to think about different ways of doing things. I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge for you, I would suggest. But you have to recognize that he's going to come from a different angle and hopefully going to improve what you've done.
That's interesting that you say that. It gets to a thread I wanted to pull on with you a bit, Nigel, and that is what I would describe to other people about what Adolfo and the leadership team is involved in now is, although it's still a public company, they are behaving like they're a private equity firm, doing those things. Now, some of that's quite painful for me, in that it's been some personnel changes that these are people I've known for a long, long time. But I've stayed out of the way as best I can to allow them to think like a private equity firm. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. So it's so interesting that you say that. But now you have taken your life experience, your business life experience, and brought it to a private equity firm. What surprised you there? What's changed in your playbook with the inputs of someone like a Blackstone, who's a revered asset manager in private equity?
My private equity experience before I got involved with Blackstone was at Dunkin. I got there and we had three PE firms. We had Bain, Carlyle, and TH Lee. Also, one of my other companies that I'm chairman of, been chairman of 6 years, Fuda, is as a PE firm called Vala, who were very early investors in Tesla, so very forward looking. I got recruited at Blackstone to run ServPro as chairman. They are the smartest people and the nicest people. They pride themselves on being nice. And Steven Schwartzman, who's built an unbelievable company, always talks about nice people. I love working with the Blackstone people. In fact, my wife says she thinks the happiest I've ever been has been my time at Blackstone,
No
which
kidding.
may surprise some of your listeners.
It surprises me, not because I don't think they're nice people, but nice people in private equity doesn't usually go in the same sentence.
I agree. But I think Blackstone has worked the formula out, which is basically as follows: that you hire independent chairs, and I'm encouraged to challenge the PE people. You then have an independent board, even if you're keeping it private. I mean, ServPro's been kept by Blackstone now for 6-7 years, and it will probably stay under its ownership for a lot longer. I was chairman there. I stopped being chairman there in July of 25. I think also I'm now a Blackstone advisor, so I'm spending a lot of time looking at potential acquisitions. Like I'm going to see a site of one potential acquisition today. The investment process is fantastic. Every partner in the company, whether they understand retail or fast food or whatever I'm working on, has a say. And one of the things I've learned from that is very interesting. You may have people who are experts at electrical supply or medical. They're encouraged to come on these calls. And there's cascading calls all the way up through Blackstone. And everyone reads the materials and everyone can have a say. And sometimes they ask the question you've never even considered. Like we were looking at a coffee company and someone from France said, "Why does America need any more coffee locations?" Well, someone like me had never even thought about that. So it makes you think differently. So they're very smart, they're very nice, they're very energetic, and I just love working with them. I mean, and I think they have a real culture that is a positive culture, and they now own 260 portfolio companies, which is remarkable in its own way.
That is remarkable. And so many, you've only worked with well-known brands in terms of the companies that I know you've been involved with as a leadership in a leadership role. You mentioned Blockbuster early on. One of the things that we've confronted as a company and as a collection of companies is changes in technology. And certainly Blockbuster was both a creation of and a victim of changes in technology. As in your role today, how do you advise your companies to keep the thumb on the pulse of what's coming in terms of changing technologies? And let's get on the record that we're at this for a little bit already, and we haven't yet mentioned AI.
Okay, well, interesting. So sometimes when I talk to students like you do, I go through a little preamble about technology. That when I started working in 1970, I had a machine that worked very hard and I used it all day. What was it? And people don't get it. They always say a calculator. It's actually a pen. And what is interesting is I've seen, and you're not as old as me, but you've seen...
Very close.
Very close. But you've seen all the changes. So I remember the first time I saw email was in 1977. I saw a fax machine and thought the world would never get any better in terms of technology. And I've seen all the changes. I think AI is the most exciting thing I've ever seen.
I agree.
And and I use it all day, every day. But there was a great article in one of the papers today about AI and education, which basically suggested how you use AI so you don't give up on your brain. I mean, I never use AI to write an email. I never ask AI to write a report. I use it to find out nuances and facts that are important. And I think you have to try and balance those two. But I think we're really in a fascinating period now where people are going to have to be trained on how to use AI. Abercrombie, being a public company, I'm only going to tell you public information. We did a deal with Perplexity. This is this agentic commerce that is becoming bigger and bigger. Was started with Walmart and ChatGPT. I think it's going to make it easier for customers to buy things. I think it's going to help people select items. And I think every company has to somehow bring AI, not just for improving productivity, but improving the selling process to their customers. So I'm excited about it, or something like that. So I think we have to be concerned. And one of the things that I really am worried about is in terms of data protection, in terms of data security. Marks and Spencer lost all their systems for, I think it was 2 months last year. Range Rover, Land Rover, whatever they're called, lost their systems as well. I think AI is going to make it easier for companies to be invaded by the bad guys.
The bad guys seem to embrace new technologies earliest.
And it's interesting. I mean, even in the football world, you know, the smallest company I'm involved in is my football club, but Manchester United got attacked severely 2 years ago. So I think I'd encourage everyone who's listening to say, whatever size company you've got, how secure is your data? Because I think that's something that's so important these days.
I agree. Now, on the brand front, as your role as an advisor and us having a mutual friend in the amazing Jeff Sonnenfeld, who's credited as being, and rightfully so, the CEO Whisperer. If you were the Whisperer, with or without Jeff, talking to Julie Fells Massino at Cracker Barrel, what would you tell her today? Meaning Cracker Barrel, Julie tried to make changes there, tried to upgrade the logo, the design of the stores, and the menus, and there was a customer revolt. Were you surprised by that? Is there something unique about some brands and the relationship consumers have with them from an emotional point of view? What went wrong there?
I'm not quite sure really what went wrong. I think it got political very quickly. I mean, at Dunkin, we changed the brand to Dunkin from Dunkin' Donuts.
And it was a beloved brand, and people saying, no. And now they're saying, of course. But there was a lot of years in between that.
And then, if you look at Burger King, which I was at, for the record, from 89 to 94, they've changed their logo several times, and they've virtually gone back to the original one now, if you look at it. It's very sensitive. I mean, one of the brands I've mentioned, but I won't say which one, we're going through a brand rethought right now, and you've got to be very careful. That's the first thing. Cracker Barrel, I'm not quite sure how it became political, but I think you've got to be very careful of getting in the world of politics. I mean, I've worked at different times closely with Republican and Democratic administrations. I think you have to be careful getting out there and accusing the administration of things, even if you think what they're doing is wrong. I mean, I'll give you an example. When Obama was in power, they wanted to strengthen the franchisor oversight of franchisees. And I spoke to the Secretary of Labor several times. In fact, I got on very well with him, and he lives not far from me here in Boston. And I think we nearly got him to change his mind about how the brands, the franchisors, could help train people better than they have in the past. So I think one of the things I love about America is the administration of any persuasion is much more accessible than it is in other countries.
Huh.
And
I wouldn't have guessed that.
I always remember in Trump's first term, we were talking about trying to improve conditions for franchisees. And I actually said to the Small Business Administration Secretary, okay, I hear you're planning to take down the tax rate to 20%, corporate tax rate to 20%. Why don't you take it up to 21% and allow franchisees and other similar businesses to have a pass-through tax? And she said, well, that's an interesting idea. Amazingly, the next day, Trump announced 21%. Now, I wasn't very popular with some of the other companies, but I think people forget how quickly this country moves. And so I don't know what happened at Cracker Barrel. I think Cracker Barrel does have a tradition. It's a brand that clearly has had a lot of activists interested in it.
And they can sometimes perhaps fuel the fire?
It may have done. I don't know. To be honest, I've not really followed it that closely. But I think you have to be careful with the politics. You have to test any brand changes. Perhaps they did it too quickly. I mean, one of the benefits we did at Dunkin, they're still rolling it out now.
And that's 8 years later.
Yeah.
From gratitude to comfort to birthdays. Commemorate life's important moments with something special. Find the perfect gift at Harry & David. We make it easy to be thoughtful. So you mentioned politics. You mentioned leadership. Our mutual friend, Jeff Sonnenfeld, has a book coming out in February, March, I think it is, called Trump, the 10 Commandments. And what I love about Jeff and his knowledge about leadership and the class he gets to teach, by the way, doesn't he make you wish you were a college student all over again so you could go and take his class?
Well, by the way, I have two college students. I have a 46-year-old, a 20-year-old, and an 18-year-old.
So you're still in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So a question then would be, you're in a room and the phone rings. There's two phones. And on one end of the phone is a lady named Maria Corina Machado, who's the exiled Venezuelan who has claimed to the presidency and has won a Nobel Prize. She's in exile. And the other phone rings, and you and Jeff are in that room. And the other phone is Delcy Rodriguez, who's the ascending vice president after the aforementioned fast-moving President Donald Trump authorized the extradition and capture of the leader of Venezuela. So what advice do you give to those two ladies who, let's assume they want to do the best thing for their country? They have a brand management role. They have an immediate crisis role. They have a leadership void and sense of responsibilities. You're on the phone with Delcy Rodriguez. How do you advise her how to manage internally and externally what's going on in the next couple of days?
Well, that is known as putting you on the spot. But anyway, okay, so I've always believed that conflicts have to be addressed directly. And I would say to them, and, I've read a little bit about both of them, and I won't remember their names. So you've probably got it written down. So you've got an advantage over me. But the one who won the Nobel Peace Prize,
Maria Corina Machado.
Yeah. She's, if you like, on the outs at the moment.
She's literally out of the country in hiding.
Exactly. And she went on that amazing trip to get out of the country. I think I'd say to both of them, look, you both tell me you want the best for Venezuela. And the president has been criticized for perhaps a lack of consultation with the so-called Group of Eight, which is people from the Congress and Senate. I would say to them, look, we need to plan a forward path for Venezuela. And just to remind everyone, this was a great country. When I first got the Blockbuster, our first two franchises were in Spain and Venezuela. So I would say to them, I'd love to set up a meeting because this has to be driven by Venezuelans. You're the two leaders. Put you in a room with some members from the Senate and Congress and the administration and talk about what we can agree on. And that's the key word. What can we agree on? Not what can we disagree on, what we can. And I think, and again, I may be out of date or up to date. I think at some stage there has to be an election, because my understanding of what the administration's tried to do hasn't been to get rid of everyone, is to set a new path forward that America's not directly involved in. But I think a group like that, which is probably, let's say, 10, 12 people, sitting around, and there probably needs to be someone like the Secretary of State, Rubio, chairing it. It's not going to be like an hour's meeting. It needs to be several hours. Just talk about what are the obstacles, what are the problems, what can they agree on? I mean, that's the most important thing. And it's no different, in my view, from franchisees and the brand. That's what I would say. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great suggestion, and I wouldn't be surprised if Secretary Rubio, who, by the way, has really surprised me. I wasn't as familiar with his worldview and his depth of global knowledge before he became the Secretary of State. He's really impressed me, and particularly in this issue, his depth and breadth and candor. So I think expect a phone call from him, but I think that's exactly the right way to proceed. I think it's forget about whether you agreed it should happen, it didn't happen, or how it happened. From this moment forward, what a wonderful opportunity for the people of Venezuela, for the people here in this hemisphere. And I know I'm a fan of President Ivan Duque, the former president of Colombia, who, at the Duque Institute in Washington, D.C., has been advocating for the United States to be a leader in terms of hemispheric relations. And his points are about the economic opportunity, the opportunity for developing people together, and for security for the whole of the United States and the North and South America, the Western Hemisphere. So he could play a very important role here with his experience. And Colombia has been overwhelmed by more than 3 million Venezuelan refugees as a result of this administration. So everyone has a stake in this. And so I think that's exactly the right path. And it seems to me that that's exactly the path that this administration is on. So wrapping up, Jeff Sonnenfeld had some amazing correspondence this weekend on just this subject, but put you back in that classroom, not talking to your own children of college age, but talking to those young people that we get to visit with in the spring each year. What advice would you have for them this year in terms of their careers? You mentioned how you thought of all the transformations that you and I have lived through, that you think this is the biggest and most impactful. That is the advent of artificial intelligence, and clearly robotics on the heels of that, aided and abetted by artificial intelligence, clearly going to have an impact on your old fast food service world. What advice do you have for them in terms of how they think about their career's next step? 2 years ago, when you and I were there in the spring, of the 22 people we had lunch with, 18 were going to work in the consulting world. This year, 80% of them didn't have a job offer yet. So things have changed dramatically in a year. I like the idea of consulting because I think people who go into the consulting world learn how to work hard, learn how to work collaboratively, learn how to use the new tools, and they're learning all these things, getting paid quite a handsome sum, but they're really advancing their education. They're now switching from paying for education to getting paid for education. But what would you advise the young people we'll see in the spring?
Well, I think, and I talk to a lot of young people, I think the first thing I would say, I'm somewhat worried by a lot of MBA students who've never actually worked in a company like 1-800-Flowers or Dunkin or Jersey Mike's or whatever. And my advice to them is always, you need to know how things happen in the company, whether it's how people are managed, whether how marketing programs are put together, then sold to franchisees, whether it's how products are made. I mean, when I worked at Rolls-Royce, the life cycle of some of our engines was like 20 years. People could spend half a career and then find that what they worked on was a failure. That was a big lesson I learned there. So I think you have to work in a company. That's the first thing. Even if it's a 1-year assignment, know how companies work, because I think a lot of the kids coming out of business schools are very good at doing the analysis and the math that goes with it. Is how things work is my main advice. I am concerned. This is my 20-year-old son, where he got this from, so your listeners should recognize this may not be accurate. The number of graduates, not MBA graduates, the number of basic degree graduates without jobs in 25, he thought was going to be 40%. In the next 2 years, it could go as high as 50%. That's concerning, because people have gone there to try and invest in education for their career. So I think people need to have as many skills as possible, and take every opportunity you can to get different blends of experience. I agree with you. Consulting is a great way out. Probably don't get stuck there like some people do. But then again, as someone who came to see me recently, who's a very high-level consultant in a very well-known company, and he wanted to know how he can carry on working like I do, which is just, despite the fact that I probably sound as I spend all my time working, I don't. I work out all the time. I play golf, I run, I play tennis, I play pickleball, I like doing long swims, etc. You name it. And I watch a lot of sports. Life is about balance, but you have to earn it. And I think you need to have some hands-on practical experience.
Such great advice. And I think for young and old alike, you round trip that for us. Nigel Travis, you're terrific. I always enjoy any opportunity I get to chat with you, spend time with you. And I think our community completely understands why. Thanks for being with us today.
Delighted. Thank you.
Speak to you soon, buddy.